Okay, 1 sack of malt, 25 kilograms, from Gilbertson and Page here in Canada. Very excellent malt. In this case it is malted wheat, which it says on this little label here. The reason I am using malted wheat is because I'm making a wheat beer. That is usually the first beer I make every season, mainly because by this point in the year I'm darn near out of beer, which I am, and a Bavarian wheat beer ferments very quickly and can be ready to serve in as little as 7 days after brew day. So I am going to open up this 25 kilo bag of malted wheat. I will use about 10 kilos of it, and I'm going to measure it out here on my scale. Currently 0. Now this is a bit of an oddity. I open up my sack of malted wheat and I look inside and I see some kernels of corn. And this looks like an issue that I am going to have to email the maltster about and let them know about this problem, because that could actually cause a problem with my mill. You can see just by swishing my hand around, I found a number of kernels of corn in there, and I think there's going to be quite a bit more just by giving my... Oh, there goes one, there's another one there, and another one here. Just by swishing my hand around, I am uncovering. There's 2 more. Lots of corn. So all the way down through this bag, this is going to be a real pain in the ass going through this to make sure that I'm not getting any. There's another one. Make sure that I'm not getting any corn. Now, I've never had this problem before with this maltster, and I've always been extremely happy with the malt and the service, and fortunately I know that the owner would like very much to hear my feedback on this, and she will probably do some kind of a quality control check to make sure. There's another one, to make sure that this is not happening very often. Look at that. Just in about 2 minutes I've uncovered all of this corn in my sack of malted wheat. Now, corn does have its place in brewing, and I buy flaked corn from the same maltster, in fact, but I don't want it in my wheat. So basically what I do is I take a container like this, I scoop out some malt, and I pour it into my bucket. Woo, look at all that dust. I better keep that dust away from my camera. And that was only 1 kilo. And I'm going to have to do this slowly and check for corn as I'm going along, so I'll put the camera down at the moment. So again, I'm just pouring it off slowly. Oh, there's some corn, so I've got to go in, get the corn out. Oh, it's a bit of a pain, but it's not too bad. Really, it's going a little more slowly than it normally does because I'm searching for the corn. There's another piece. Anyway, I'll put the camera down and keep going until I get 10 kilos. So the water is now at our 202 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a fair bit warmer than I usually make it in the summertime, but my mash tun is going to be pretty cold, which will take away quite a bit of the heat. I'm just guessing at this value right now. We'll see what I end up needing. I may end up having to mix in some cold water to my mash tun. We shall see. Normally in the summer I heat it to 176 Fahrenheit or 180. So the whole kettle is up to temperature now. My water here in Ottawa is chlorinated, so I put 1 Vintner's Camden tablet into the kettle. That will dissolve and cause a chemical reaction that will actually remove chlorine and chloramine. Actually, Ottawa uses chloramine, not chlorine. And in a very short order, the chemical reaction will ensue, and the chloramine or chlorine will be removed from the water. You don't want chlorine in your water if you're doing a mash. It's not so bad if you're doing extract brewing. Now, one important thing about using wheat in brewing, you may not be able to see here. I'll have to do a side-by-side comparison with some barley, some malted barley. But when you malt wheat, the husk falls off of it. This does not happen with barley when you malt barley. So basically the bran of the wheat, when it gets malted, falls off and gets discarded, or perhaps it gets sold as wheat bran. I'm not quite sure what happens at that point. But in any case, this is a problem for brewing, because when you're using barley, for example, the husk acts as a filter medium in your mash tun. And since there is no husk on malted wheat, you will end up with a great big pot full of porridge and a stuck mash that will not run out the bottom. And you got to solve that problem. Now, one way you can solve the problem is mix in up to about 30% of your grain as malted barley, and the husk from the barley, even though it's only 30% of your entire grain bill, will still be enough to act as your filter. Or you can do what I'm going to do today, and I will introduce this to you in a moment. I am going to use some rice hulls, and more on that in a moment. Okay, back to our mill. Now, one thing I like about this particular mill is that the rollers in here are adjustable by means of these little knobs on the side. You turn the knob, and maybe you won't be able to see this. Let me see. Yes, I guess you can see that on the left the mill gap is going further. It's changing, getting wider and narrower. So I've found that when I crush my malt, if I pass the grain through it twice, once on a slightly wider setting and once on a narrower setting, if I do this, I get slightly better extraction from the grain than had I just passed it through once on the narrower setting. So I am going to put it on the wider setting now, pass the grain through once, and then adjust it to a narrower setting and pass it through again. So you can see, as I mentioned already in the earlier, hand cranking your mill is for chumps. I don't like to do it. I put a drill on there. I've got my mill set up, my grain right here, and I'm just going to scoop the grain out, dump it into here, and operate the mill in the process, or operate the drill rather in the process. So we'll just do that. Now, this will be a bit difficult to juggle with a camera in my hand, so Mickey safety, you don't want to be looking for this. Let's see, this is going to make a lot of noise. And you can see, let's see if I can get a shot of the grain coming out the bottom. So I am going to grind the whole thing, and then we'll show you what it looks like after it's been passed through the mill the first time. So I mentioned earlier about the rice hulls. Here's what rice hulls look like, just a small handful of them. It's the light, fluffy outer husk or bran of the rice that doesn't actually make it to market. Even on the I believe on the brown rice you still don't have this on it. It is very similar to the hull that is on barley, and if you put enough of it in here, for 10 kilos of wheat, I will probably put in 1.5 kilos or 2 kilos of rice hulls. It adds no flavor whatsoever to the beer. It's basically, it doesn't take part in the mash reaction in the mash tun. It's just a filter medium to keep it all from clogging up in the mash tun. I'll put enough of it in there, and it will let the mash flow freely at the end. Okay, you can hear the pump churning away there. I just got hot water going in there, coming down in there, right up over, and right back into the kettle. I'm just making sure things are working here. Yeah, water coming out. And actually, part of the reason I do this is to preheat the pump, so that when I do pump into my mash tun, which I'm going to do momentarily, I will not be losing heat to the pump itself. The pump will be fully preheated at that point.